I'm Thierry Heles. This is The Next Leap. There aren't many university venture funds in Central and Eastern Europe, but that could all be about to change if Károly Szántó has his way. The COO of OUVC, the venture fund and studio set up by Óbuda University in Budapest, is working on a playbook that other institutions in the region can use to create their own venture capital funds, an interest Károly has identified at several universities. But his ambition goes beyond just sharing his expertise with other universities. He's also working to bring funds from Western European universities in as co-investors. Today on the podcast, we're heading to Hungary to find out how the ecosystem functions today, what's still missing, and why OUVC is about to be split into two separate entities. We also talk about Károly's own storied life, which includes work in 50 countries, finding his passion for university venturing when he first helped startups for a CVC, and what sailing across the Atlantic in 23 days taught him about startups. Károly, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Thierry. Pleasure to be here.
I look forward to this conversation. I don't know a lot about what's happening in Hungary, so this will be quite an insightful conversation. To start with, an easy one. Can you give me an overview of OUVC?
Sure. So OUVC is a university venture capital firm. We started operations in 2023, beginning of October. OUVC has two limited partners, two investors in the fund. One is the University of Óbuda, which is mainly a technical university, but not only. It has 7 faculties: mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, IT, and it has also a business faculty. And the other limited partner is a fund of funds called Széchenyi Tőke Alap. Széchenyi is a financial investor in that sense. And so we have, depending on the currency rate, we have about 26 million euros to invest in early stage startups from the university, but also out on the market.
Okay, interesting. So you're not just investing in the spin-outs themselves. I'm guessing that's a pipeline issue?
It is. It's also, the concept of having a university-backed venture capital is something new in Hungary, but also in the region. Therefore, there is quite a bit of education in terms of collaborating with the university, how to spin out a startup, how to grow a startup. I will dig deeper in that. There is an innovation ecosystem at Óbuda University. We are just one member of that ecosystem trying to make the magic happen. But yes, it's a pipeline issue, so we currently don't have enough university spin-offs. We are working on that. But also, it has another angle as well, that we believe that startups from the market, originating from the market, not from the university, they see some value in collaborating with universities, having access to the university resources. And so we are trying to facilitate that relationship between the market and the university.
Okay. We will get to, in more depth, to quite a few of those things that you've just touched on. Can you give me a flavor of the portfolio companies that you do have at the moment?
So first off, we are industry agnostic. I would say our most critical filter, there are two things. One is that we are always looking for some kind of affiliation with the university. It could be that the startup was originated in the university, so it's a spin-off, or it could come from the market, but we establish some kind of a working relationship between the startup and the university. It could be a common research or R&D, or using the resources, laboratories, and so on of the university. So university affiliation. And the second one is any kind of relation to Hungary. Now, we can invest all across Europe, actually globally, but we are always looking for some Hungarian leg, so to say. It's a soft filter, yeah? It's a soft requirement. So it could be that one of the founders is Hungarian, or the startup is doing some research and development in Hungary. So any kind of Hungarian interest. So these two things are the criteria, and it reflects on our portfolio. So therefore, we are not only investing in one or the other sector, we are agnostic as far as these two criteria are met. And so within our portfolio, for instance, we have a software as service company, which is entirely focusing on the ESG sector and CSRD. It's basically a combination of professional services and a software tool. The software is a tool for companies and organizations to ensure compliance with ESG and CSRD regulations. That's one example. Then we have other portfolio companies that are on a totally different segment. We have a machine learning, visual AI startup, which is in the sport industry. I don't know if you have heard about the sport called pickleball. It's getting very popular. It is huge in the US. It's getting popular in Europe as well. So what they are doing is they are analyzing the players and they provide a match analysis. And also, I think the core feature is a rating system. And once they monetize on the pickleball, they are looking at expanding into other sports like ping pong or table tennis and so on. So that's a totally different segment.
That is very cool, though. Yeah, pickleball has definitely not quite come out of nowhere, but it's sort of exploded in popularity in recent, maybe even just over the last year or two. Yeah, definitely can see people playing in the park when I take my dog for a walk.
It's getting popular. And then we have, again, another totally different topic, a medical device. It's actually not very early stage, it's more late stage, but as medical devices go, they're under a lot of regulatory pressure in terms of acquiring an FDA approval and so on. So they have a product, they have the testing period, clinical testing, and so on. And now they are in the FDA approval phase. So again, a totally different topic. By the way, I think we'll have a little bit more focus on healthcare, medical, and pharma in the coming years, but it's not to say that we'll not invest in anything else.
Yeah, just more of a focus. You personally, you've got quite an interesting life story, actually. One of the things that you've done that's really cool is you sailed the Atlantic within, was it 23 days, which is just kind of a really cool story. Why University Venture Capital? How did you end up in this? What led you to this point?
Yeah, good question. So most people I know that work for VCs have a pretty straight career journey. Business BA, MBA, either Big Four consultancy or investment banking or any kind of banking. So that's not me. I have a very colorful background. Yeah, I started out on the business development and sales positions, in managerial positions, in, let's say, in the first 15 years of my career. And most of the time I spent abroad. So I've been working in 50 countries, 50, in the US, in Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa. And I also lived so many places like in South Africa, Greece, Brazil, North Africa, Netherlands. So usually I took a pioneering position because I like to build. I like the journey from 0 to 1. And so I ended up always in this pioneering position. For instance, when a company, a corporate would like to enter into a new market, a new geographical market, or a new segment, then I took the lead and I built up reseller networks and partnerships and sales channels and so on, which I enjoyed a lot. But then because of family, I started to, calm down and spend more time at home. And when I came back to Hungary full time, I didn't really know what to do. And I ended up at a company which also had a venture capital arm. Just naturally, people started to ask me questions. How do you go to market? How do you do sales? How do you scale up a company internationally? And so that's when I realized that all my past experiences created a value for all these startups, which I didn't know. And also my appetite for risk and growth, I finally find an industry that rewards such attitude. And so this is how I discovered it. It was about 10 years ago. Almost immediately, I felt at home and I immersed myself into the venture capital and startup ecosystem. So that's how. In regards to the sailing adventures, so I grew up in a sailing family. My father was a marine on a commercial ship. My son is a sailing instructor in the US. And I started sailing when I was, I don't know, 6 maybe. We had a small sailing boat. We have a big lake in Hungary, one of the biggest in Europe. And so that's where I started. And then naturally, I got into competition. So I was racing for 10 years. I was on the national league. So I was very active.
Wow.
And then in my 20s, I turned more to charter sailing, skippering on the Mediterranean, especially in the Adriatic. And then in the last, I don't know how many years, maybe 10, 20, I'm only sailing with friends and family, mainly in Croatia, on the Adriatic. And I always had this, dream that I wanted to cross the ocean. But I wanted to do it my way. I always like to measure myself. So I approached it as if I was a startup, like a market validation. Okay, here is Károly. He knows how to sell. He has all the certificates. He has assumptions that he is of value. But let's see what the customer says. So I put out myself on all these portals that people are looking for captains or skippers or crew. So I uploaded my CV. I was looking for feedback. But before I explain that, I need to explain the ecosystem of sailing jobs. So if you are on the entry level, people are actually paying big money to participate on a cross-Atlantic journey. Why? Because gaining traction. It's very similar to startup. Like you need the traction, you need to invest to have traction to build up your credibility. And then later with that traction, you can get well-paying jobs.
Okay.
So next level is that your costs are covered, like flight, food, and stuff like that, but you get no payment. And ninja level is all your costs are covered and then you get a payment. So I was interested, where the market will price me. And I ended up on the highest level, which was a success for me. So I got paid. Then I flew to Portugal into a marina, and there were 2 other guys I saw the first time in my life. And I thought maybe I'm a bit too crazy on this one, but I onboarded and we started our journey. Yeah.
That is amazing. I didn't realize that you would potentially have had to pay to get on a boat. It kind of makes sense. It's not a word that I'm familiar with, so it does sound a little bit strange that you would have to pay. But I get that no one knows who you are. Are you worth any money? Are you going to be a problem on board? Yeah.
And also, so there are many ways to cross the ocean, obviously, but there is one niche which is called a delivery job, which means when, in my case, and in most cases, somebody from the US buys a boat which is manufactured in Europe. In this case, it was France. And so the buyer entrusts a broker to deliver the boat to the US. Now, the broker is scouting for the best team because it's $1, 2, 3, 5, $10 million boats. So it's very expensive and you need professional crew to deliver, and it's very dangerous. The ocean is dangerous in itself, but these boats are not made for crossing the ocean. These are made for coastal, fun sailing with your family and stuff. So you are there on an expensive boat, which is not meant to cross the ocean, but you have to do it anyway. So that's the setup. And that's why, for good reason, people are very picky who can be a part of such a team because the responsibility is huge.
I can definitely see your love for risk is coming through both in your profession and what is now a hobby. That is amazing. Let's move back to university venturing before we get sidetracked, because I could talk about this for hours probably. You've touched on this already a bit. What is your view of the Hungarian system? What is working well in the country? What's missing?
So, from a bird's eye perspective, what is missing is actually something, it's a cultural thing, I believe, some bravery. Translating to business, it's more like the sales and marketing skills. So, in our culture, you have to do things right. Failure is not an option. So you have to keep your face. Therefore, in the startup culture, it's one failure after the other. And you have to get used to screwing up things. That's very far from the Hungarian culture. You don't want to lose face. You don't want to screw up things. You want to do it right. And that slows down the process. So if you are building a startup using lean methodology, for instance, that's constant failures, learning curve, iterations, pivots, and so on. So I would say that's holding back a lot of the startups. How does it translate to everyday life of a startup? Typical pattern is people are obsessed with building and developing products, but they never ask the market whether they need that product. I think it's international, but in Hungary, it's even more. So quite often when startups come to pitch at OUVC, they are disappointed because they come with their nice pitch and all they want is to talk about all the tiny bit of feature improvements in their software. And so the way I start a meeting is that I already know. So the way I start it is, listen, I'm pretty sure that your product is amazing. Let's not talk about your product. Let's talk about your market and the problem that you are solving. And I want to understand how much time you invested in talking to your potential clients. Many people are, disappointed. We have spent 4 years in developing our product. Why don't you take 5 minutes to look at it?
I'm not the customer.
I'm not the customer. Yeah, you have to go out. So that's a typical one.
I can understand where people are coming from, but I don't also quite understand how you would spend 4 years building something without having asked anyone if it's of any use. That's so much time wasted, it's money wasted, it's other people's money and time wasted. But I also get that that's quite a big culture shift. And as you said, it's something that people struggle with. I mean, it's something that people struggled here in the UK, and they've kind of tried to update programs to make people go out and talk to customers before they spend 4 years building something that potentially no one wants.
Yeah, and I totally get it. I mean, it's not a comfortable situation to talk to hundreds of clients. It's not. You will get cancelled, refused, criticized, ghosted, you name it. You will get it all. But so what I'm looking for in founders is the scars that they gather during their journey. So I want to see they should be committed and invested in taking all these scars during the problem and customer discovery phase. Some of them are open to that. Some of them are coachable or could be motivated. Some others, they close down and they go back to their product. That's difficult. But then also it depends on the kind of startup. So for instance, let's say the background of a startup, if it is a university research, then yes, you need to invest sometimes years in the research and then commercialize and spin off. That takes years. And that's a different story. And yeah, in that sense, I get it. It's a little bit different, even sometimes very different. But then there comes a time, even in that kind of startup, when you need people on board who are able to do client discoveries and finding a way to the market.
Yeah, I would probably argue that even with the university spin-off, once the spin-off is kind of created, that's sort of the point where you have to figure out whether there is a point of having a spin-off. Because otherwise you're creating this company and building this team for something that potentially has no market. But yeah, no, I totally get it. Sometimes there's decades of research before that point. But then that's what universities are set up to do rather than a startup in a proverbial garage. What motivated Óbuda University to get involved in this then? Was that a lack of money for their startups? Was it that same recognition that there is something missing in the Hungarian ecosystem?
Good one. Yeah. We should definitely ask the university leadership here, but I'm not here to speak on their behalf. The way I see it, the way my perception is that first off, we have a very open and motivated rector. And he is, I think, very keen on facilitating innovation ecosystem within Óbuda University. I think it should come from the top leadership. Without the support and, belief, you cannot do it. That was one thing. Continuous support as well. But then I think why and how exactly it delivers value to the university, there are hundreds of ways how it creates value. Just to start with the most obvious, universities are obsessed with their ranking. So I believe that if a university has a working, functioning innovation ecosystem, that actually converts into higher ranking. And then it attracts more international students, which translates to more revenue as well, but also more prestige and opens up a lot of doors for collaboration on international level. And then number of publications and so on. So yeah, it has an avalanche effect basically. But also there is one other thing that, yes, there are several VCs active in Hungary, but university is a different species, let's say. You need to understand the ins and outs of the university structure, what you can do and what are the limitations of spinning out startups. So in that sense, I think it's not competing with all the other VCs. Actually, by the way, it's very important that we prefer co-investments.
Okay, yeah.
We are very active in pursuing other venture capital firms that have nothing to do with the university world. They're out on the market and we love to co-invest with them. Why? Because we believe that together we can build stronger teams and stronger exits by pulling together and building up a wider network in the academic as well as in the market segment. I think it's a value for the startups as well.
Yeah. That's certainly something that I've heard pretty much every other university fund out there say. They don't want to be the only investor. Often they're just the first investor because that's sort of the reality of that world. But they never want to be the only investor because, for one, the second VC that comes in also is a validation that the company has worth outside of what the university perceives.
Exactly.
And then also, one fund can't carry a startup, shouldn't carry or shouldn't even try to carry a startup because that is a recipe for disaster.
I have a question to you. I don't mean to steal your show, but just I'm curious.
No, go for it.
Do you often see university venture capital firms collaborating and co-investing with other university venture capital firms?
Not in terms of co-investment. I found that they're often quite happy to exchange best practices and collaborate on that level, or even I've been to joint conferences run by a few university funds. I think often that's because the funds do have that focus on their immediate region or ecosystem, which then naturally kind of limits them. It's probably happened. I don't think a lot of them set out to specifically do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do have funds that invest much more broadly, sometimes even internationally, and do kind of what you do. So they invest in startups from the wider world, often to then kind of bring the expertise back in, but not necessarily can be financial motivation. But no, I've not actually seen a lot of university funds team up to co-invest in a startup. I can't actually think of an example right now, which doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
That's what I expected actually, but you confirmed based on your experience. But this is something I want to activate.
Okay.
We just hosted at Óbuda University Times Higher Education Conference together with SOTA, which is a medical university in Budapest. I believe that for us, the future would be to co-invest and co-develop projects. And when you think of it, it's not only on the investment level, because if it's truly a university startup, then that startup has strong academic background, research, and whatnot. And so on that level, on the academic level, they sure do need to collaborate with the University of, I don't know, Cambridge or doesn't matter that, but anything but not their neighbor universities. So just to go out and try to establish co-developments and co-research opportunities. But following that pattern, I believe that once that is established, why don't we invest together? That would only make sense. And these days I'm reaching out and speaking with some universities in the UK and the US, well-known universities. And to my surprise, they seem to be rather open for this concept. I don't think that we should only do this. This is not the mainstream, I know, but I want to do a couple of investments like that. I want to see a couple of collaboration built up because I think actually exchanging best practices and know-how, I'm all in for that. But I think if you have a co-investment, then you have a way to share the experience and the knowledge. You have actually a tool, a channel established between the two investors and the two universities. And I believe that that's very interesting. And I'm already talking to students, researchers that are of Hungarian origin, but they are somewhere out in the world studying, being successful, researching. And so that's something we are trying to build up from here.
That's very interesting. I'm not surprised that other universities are open to that concept. It does probably take someone like yourself to actively go and try and make those deals happen because I'm not sure they would naturally occur, or at least not very often. I know there are spin-offs that are linked to more than one university, so that's kind of a natural way that it could happen. But that's quite interesting that you're thinking beyond the best practices and building portfolio together, or at least a few startups, especially with the US and the UK as well, not just in Hungary.
Yeah, because, many of our startups and partners are not from Hungary, or they are super active in well-known universities already because they are collaborating, they are developing projects and so on. It's not just dreaming about it, it's more like utilizing what we already have and building upon that to reach a next level. But there is also something else that I've noticed, at least in the Central Eastern European region, in Hungary too, that there are no other university venture capital firms. However, many universities are playing with the thought of launching a VC, but it's very complex and it's very risky. So you probably need somebody who understands both words, the venture capital and the university. It becomes very niche in our region. But so what I'm working on at the moment is developing something what I call a university VC blueprint along with a playbook. This is something we would like to partner up with universities to guide them through in validating their assumptions, first of all, when playing with the thought of launching a VC, but also to give some tool which helps them in planning first, because I think execution comes obviously later, but just the planning of the fund is really complex because you probably will use some government agencies or supports or grants. You also will probably have unique limited partners, not like a general VC. You will have different sources for capital and you will have different playbooks for investing. And it requires a lot of policy making, like how is your IP policy? That's a hot topic at each university. Who owns the IP? How could it be spin out from the university? Big topics. And so to align all the processes and policies and to build up a system which then can be executed, that's quite a work. And there's plenty of room for errors, which with our help could be minimized. So that's something I'm working on. And I think in the second half of the year, we are going to launch a program for that. And that program, I think, would be also interesting for Western universities. Not that they are buyers or users of this program, but they could participate as partners because then they have access to deal flow that they don't even see at the moment. Deal flow for academic research, but deal flow for co-investment opportunities. So that's another direction that we are active in.
That is very cool. That would have been my next question, whether this is focused on more of Central Eastern Europe or also Western universities. But that makes sense that the blueprint would be for universities in your region, but the opportunities would then hopefully naturally also go into Western universities and potential co-investors. You are 100% right. Western Europe tends not to really be aware of what's happening in Central and Eastern Europe. Maybe Central, Eastern more, depending on where you specifically draw that line. Some countries like to think of themselves more in Central than in Western or in Eastern. Yeah, that's true. Not just in universities, probably. We're not going to get into politics, but I think generally that's kind of true that there is this divide between Western and CEE. That's very cool. I look forward to seeing that work come out in the second half of the year.
The venture capital world is already super active in my region. So the top VC brands, they have long discovered that there's an opportunity here because in my region, for instance, medical, pharma studies are very strong, the education part, and also engineering. So you have top quality researchers and students, but there is the arbitrage opportunity. A startup that's incorporated in Hungary, the valuation of that company is obviously lower than as if it was incorporated in Oxford, for instance. So it's the combination of sourcing from here, but then expanding to Western Europe and rest of the world. VCs have already discovered this opportunity, so they are paying scouts, they have onboarding programs, a lot of programs are active in Hungary, Romania, all the neighboring countries, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and so on. I don't see the same thing happening with universities, so we want to make that happen and combine the two words.
Czech Republic, I think the only fund that kind of springs to mind that's sort of linked to university is I&I. I think that was backed by Charles University in Prague. Romania, I get the sense that they're trying to catch up. I'm not sure if there's much happening yet.
Actually, in Romania, there are going to be several new venture capital funds. There are some programs running, launching new funds with government and EU help. We might be part of this in some cases. We are working with some local partners there on helping them launching a fund and operating a fund. Although I haven't seen any university venture capital fund. So I think Romania is doing an excellent job on building up their ecosystem, the speed of how they are building, all the respect for them. So I think, yes, they are catching up, but they're getting there a lot faster than Hungary did. But of course, they have one advantage for sure is that they can learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, that's very true. You have not necessarily the blueprint, but you can see how other people have done it and adapt and learn from that. We talked a little bit before about building things. You also run a venture studio, which I think is mostly what you focus on at OUVC. Can you tell me a little bit about that part of the group?
Yeah, sure. So currently OUVC is in one legal entity is a venture capital and a venture studio. The mechanics of a venture studio is that experienced entrepreneurs, exited founders get deep insights in one segment. It could be anything. Let's stick to pharma, for instance. They have built up one or two or three companies, exited, earned some good money, but most importantly, understood how the industry works, and they have discovered 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 other problems that they think could be solved and by the solution monetize. And so a group of entrepreneurs come together as a venture studio and they actually craft new startups 3, 4, 5 every year. And so for that reason, they have an infrastructure and a playbook, a very good playbook on how to build startups for a specific segment the most efficient way. And because they know the go-to-market, they have the network in that segment. That's a huge advantage. And also they have built similar companies. And then there are several different kind of venture studio types. There are some hybrid ones financed by a VC. There are self-financed. There are some who first build up infrastructure services that will be required by venture studio startups. They monetize that. Then now they have a cash flow and now they start to build. Example, what every company needs, for instance, software developers. So let's build up a software development division, work for the market. And then when you break even, you have some good cash flow. Then the same team and service will provide services internally for the venture studio. But you can build up, I don't know, an accounting firm as well, or graphic design. I don't know, anything you can imagine. And so that's another way to finance a venture studio. In our case at OUVC, the thesis was this. There was a first wave of venture capital, at least in my region, and the tactic was this. Hello, startup, we give you money and then we wish you all the good luck. Come back in 5 years with a return on our investment. Cheers. You can imagine the results. Yeah, it was not so fascinating. And then came something that we call smart money, or I call smart money. So more and more investors discover that, hey, we need to support our portfolio to ensure that they will not fail and they will reach their goals. So smart money meant, hey, we have a pool of experts and advisors. Lean on them, use them, they will support you. But that's like introducing advisors, yeah? It's not like you're actively participating in building your portfolio. I already explained the venture studio, and so we try to mix the two, which in our word, it means hands-on support for the startups. And by hands-on, I mean the venture studio team can and will become part of the startup team for a sprint, for a period of time until a very critical milestone is reached. For instance, market validation or acquiring the first, I don't know, 100 clients or signing a strategic partnership and so on. Actually, the scope of the venture studio work is very wide, but usually it focuses on sales, business development, market validation. But because we work closely, now we understand better what they're doing and what they are fighting with. And so we are more equipped to introduce the right advisor or the right marketing agency or the right software developer or the right lawyer to that specific need. So that's what we do. And as we speak, we are actually spinning out the venture studio to become a separate legal entity from the VC, because I think it works better. And from a financial point of view as well, you want to track the performance of the venture studio separately from a VC. VC is not a revenue focused business, but venture studio is.
I'm guessing the two will still collaborate going forward when they are separate. There's still going to be a strong relationship between the two. Or are you looking to use that as an opportunity to diverge?
Yeah, it's a strategic partnership for sure. And there are two ways we will most likely connect on a daily basis. One is supporting the portfolio of the VC, but not in general. It's not portfolio management. In other words, the venture studio services are not obligatory for the portfolio companies. That's very important in the world where I come from. I want to have it as a market-based service. If they recognize the value and they choose to work with venture studio, good, but we shouldn't force it. What we as investors could force is to identify before the investment, identify gaps or lack of skills or competencies within the startup. And then we can circle that and say, hey, in month number 7, you will need somebody, senior sales professional, who already has the network in the UK, for instance. And so now you need to scout for that. And for that, you need maybe a talent acquisition expert. And here is one, we can introduce you to one. So if they are not working with the venture studio, still there needs to be all those gaps identified and there needs to be some solution for that. If they decide to work with the venture studio, then it's a service we provide. And so that's one connection with the VC. And the other connection is something what I call bridging the investment readiness gap. What is it? And now I'm going to talk from under my VC hat. We see hundreds of startups coming in and pitching, but only maybe 2% is investment ready. By investment ready, I mean they have a healthy financial plan, they have a valid business plan, they have a full team, a capable and experienced team. They have the ability of executing the plan, and the cap table is clean, and the IP situation is also handled and clean and lean. Now, this is not the case in most of the startups. So, what happens in this case? The VC would like to invest, but the company is not ready for investment. Somebody has to do the work to bridge this gap. Will the VC do that? No, because the VC is dealing with a huge deal flow. The investment team is too busy becoming an accelerator or an incubator for the sake of one investment. So that's not efficient, and that's a pain point, not only at OUVC, but in all the VCs that I know of. Somebody needs to put in the work. But that somebody who will actually put in the work should deeply understand that particular VC, the processes of that VC, the requirements of that VC, and also should deeply engage with that particular startup. So that's time consuming. Yeah. So that's why we thought once the VC says that we are interested in this startup, but they are not just quite ready yet, can you work with them? Yes. And then we prepare them for investment, and hopefully we will work with them after the investment.
Would you also work with the university still? Would you help them with their spin-offs in the studio specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. We will work with the university as well. And by the way, the university has several innovation ecosystem players, or from another perspective, several tools to support innovation initiatives. As a researcher or as a student, you can actually apply for a small fund in the range of, let's say, €10,000 maximum for proof of concept. That's like the first step. Second step, let's say proof of concept went well. You are about to build something, but you don't yet want to incorporate. So then we have a company called Initium, and they are very professional in incubating these startups. It's like an internal accelerator program, and they can also invest small ticket sizes below 80,000 euros. And so let's say they're successful with one or the other projects, and now they are incorporating and they need anything above 80,000 euros, and that's where we come into play. Then it's a startup. So we are going to provide services for Initium as well as for some education. I was teaching at the university the proof of concept topic. Also, I'm part of many mentoring programs in Hungary. So education is a big part of what we are doing.
A lot of really cool stuff to come still. I hadn't realized that we have already been talking for the full time that we'd allocated to this. It's really flown by. This has been fascinating. Is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you are keen to get out there before we say goodbye?
No, I think we covered most of the topics. Maybe I could leave an analogy between crossing the Atlantic and building a startup.
Please do, yeah.
So during my cross-Atlantic sailing journey, something I discovered it's very similar to building a startup. Why? Because you have a clear goal, but you have a very, very limited resources, and you need to solve all the problems on the spot and on the fly. You cannot ask for more water, more electricity, more people, more tools, nothing. You just have to solve it. And it has to work. It will not look nice. You duct tape the whole world around yourself just to make it work. But you gotta make it work and you need to survive. And that's amazing to see a physical manifestation of this concept on a sailing boat. And that reassured me that the skills that are required to building a successful startup is just, understanding of your limitations and just work with them anyway.
That is definitely the most unique final words that I've heard from anyone, and really inspiring message as well. I look forward to following your journey as you spin out of OUVC and all the great work that you'll do in the second half of this year, specifically with the blueprint. Károly, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. It's been great chatting with you. Thanks for the invitation.
The Next Leap is hosted and produced by me, Thierry Heles. Jenna Clark is the graphic designer, Alex White is the composer, and Roxy is the production supervisor and the best dog in the world. If this is your first time listening, make sure to hit that subscribe or follow button and listen to our previous episodes as well. If you're already a fan, why not take a moment to share this podcast with your colleagues or post about it on social media? That is the best way to help the show grow. And hey, did you know that The Next Leap also provides media and data research services? If you'd like to work together on an event, need someone to write a paper, or just want someone to host a webinar, message me on LinkedIn or at thierry@thenextleap.is. You can also contact me, of course, if you're interested in being a guest on the show or have feedback about the podcast. Thank you for listening, or as we say back home in Luxembourg, merci, dass ihr gelauscht habt.